Hello everyone, today I will be showing how I created this stenciled frosting white cake with buttercream roses. For the white cake, you will need 2 3/4 of a cup of cake flour, 1 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 1 1/2 cups of milk, 1 cup of Greek yogurt, 4 egg whites, 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 1 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of salt. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and lightly grease a 6 to 8 inch pan. Combine the flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt in a bowl. Separate the egg whites into a large bowl. Whisk the egg whites with an electric mixer until stiff peaks form. In a separate bowl, combine the milk and vinegar and let sit for 5 minutes. Add the Greek yogurt, vanilla, and mix. Combine the flour and milk mixture. Fold in the egg whites in 3 parts. Fill the cake pans 3/4 full. Bake for 30 to 40 minutes, maybe longer. Cool on a wire rack. For buttercream frosting, you will need 5 to 6 cups or more of powdered sugar, 1 cup of butter, 3 to 4 tablespoons of heavy cream, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and blue and green food coloring. Cream the butter with an electric mixer. Add the vanilla and a little heavy cream and powdered sugar and whisk together. Divide in 2 and dye half blue and half green. I made a second batch of frosting which remained white. I used a few different piping tips for this cake. For the blue frosting, I used a round tip. I also used different sized rose petal piping tips, and I used white frosting. I used 2 different leaf piping tips and green frosting. I added a little frosting to the cake stand to hold the cake in place, and I added the first cake layer. I added blue frosting into the middle and spread evenly, and then I placed the second cake layer on top. I piped around the sides of the cake in blue frosting and flattened with a spatula to make a crumb coat. I added a crumb coat to the top of the cake and spread the frosting towards the center with a flat scraper. Once the crumb coat hardened, I added one more frosting layer. I smoothed the sides and the top of the cake with a flat scraper. I would suggest using a 90-degree scraper and not just the one flat side, as my sides were not ideal. To add a stenciled frosting, you will need a stencil, flat spatula, and frosting. First, secure the stencil to the sides of the cake with a little frosting on the ends. Then spread more frosting in one direction and scrape off any excess frosting. The frosting looks best with a thin layer. Remove the stencil and repeat around the sides of the cake. Repeat with the stencil for the top of the cake, repeating the same process. I used a damask and a mandala stencil design for this cake. To create buttercream roses, you will need piping stems, parchment paper, rose petal piping tips, and white frosting in piping bags. Apply a little frosting onto the flat end of the piping stem and apply the parchment paper. Pipe a raised center portion of frosting into the center of the parchment. With the curve of the rose petal piping tip facing away, pipe around the raised portion of the frosting, creating the first petal. Repeat in the same direction, adding more petals. I also made smaller roses with smaller rose petal tips. Let the roses firm up in the fridge or the freezer. To apply the buttercream roses, pipe a little frosting onto the cake and place the rose, and then repeat with different sized roses. I added different sized green buttercream frosting leaves in between the roses. Using white buttercream frosting and a medium star tip, I added somewhat of a scalloped border around the edge of the cake. slice and enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more of my videos, just make sure you click that subscribe button.